Good morning, sis.
Morning,
How's your
morning.
how's your Sunday going?
Smoothly, very nice. It's a beautiful day today, so can't wait to get outside.
It's a heat wave. So I'm so excited to be here for the fourth dialogue in our series.
Hmm.
But before we begin, I am in love with your shirt. And
Yeah.
yep, showing a little bit, let the world see the beauty. What's that about? Tell us about
Um,
your shirt.
yeah, so it says Ayi Bobo, and so that's in Creole, Haitian Creole. It just means like amen, ashe, hallelujah, just like a call and response, often in voodoo, where people use it in their ceremonies, and the drum is often part of
Mhm.
the ceremonies and such. So yeah, I thought it was a perfect shirt for today because it just is a call to your ancestors, your
Mhm.
spirits and all that, and just saying amen, like so be it. And
So be it. May
we're
it be
here talking
so.
about like repair. The other episodes we talked about why we didn't notice the fragmentation. We didn't have the tools we needed to reconnect. And so, as we've been talking about disconnection and fragmentation, really thought, yeah, it's important for us to think about repair, what it means to feel again, what tools are supporting us. And often for me, one of the tools that support me is my culture and my background. So when I was choosing an outfit, I was like, I think I want to wear this shirt. It was perfect. And it's also from shout out to Vernon Boulevard 3 or VB3. They're Brooklyn based. I think a few episodes ago I wore a sweatshirt that said Sac Passe. That's from them too. And so
Okay.
they're a local business. So, as the World Cup is coming up and you want to support a country, a team, you can wear some shirts that say Edie on there.
Hey, hey. Yeah, so really calling in the spirits for this conversation, particularly around
Hmm.
this conversation of repair. So I shaded that, sis. Um, I wanted to frame this conversation a little bit for us because um today, in today's parlance, a lot of times when we hear the word repair, particularly in restorative and transformative justice spaces, what we're talking about here is acknowledging harm that
Hmm.
has been done to an individual in relationships, to a people, right, in a community, taking accountability for that harm, naming it, acknowledging it, bringing awareness to it, and then beginning the process of restoring trust where
Hmm.
possible through the repair process. And so that we might ultimately transform the conditions that created the harm in the first place. So it's almost a systems approach within
Hmm.
RJ or TJ circles. When we think about the word repair, it's like, recognizing that harm has been done in the self, working with others, right, at the
Hmm.
interpersonal, relational level, and then coming together in the collective we to transform the very conditions that allowed the harm to fester or to take root in the
And
first place.
does this stem from a particular like cultural group, or is it come from like where does this process or approach come from? Do you know?
It comes from social justice circles of people who have
Mm,
been laboring across history,
mm,
time, and space, different community groups, social justice traditions, within feminist work,
yeah.
within the work around intimate and domestic partner violence.
Mm,
Uh, it comes from different faith traditions, right? This idea that repair is never an individual thing, it's a
hmm.
communal effort, right?
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that today's conversations is the first part around that. It's about, we're talking about how we began to heal and
Hmm.
or repair the work that we had to do, the openings that
Yeah.
allow us to do that for ourselves and with the support of others, right? Oftentimes in community, so that we could come together like this. We'll talk about this
Hmm.
next episode to think about, well, what are the conditions? What are the more structural systemic things that might need to happen so that this can become sustainable? So this conversation today is centering us in this idea that this sort of the healing that happens at the individual level and at the interpersonal level is just a few levels of that,
Yeah.
and that it's foundational to what makes deeper collective repair possible. and ultimately sustainable over the long term. So this is the first part of a broader, deeper conversation. And so that's the orientation around this word repair. And while we're using that very, very intentionally in conjunction with this idea of healing.
Mhm. I think that's important because, like we mentioned before about feeling conditioned to project like confidence and success and happiness in all the spaces that we're in because, we have all the credentials and this is what we thought the path we're supposed to be on. But then while you're having all that success, you're feeling disconnected internally. Maybe on the outside, people see you like as, wow, I can't believe they're there, they've made it. But inside, you're performing, you feel numb, maybe you're exhausted, you're code switching, and just really like tying your worth to productivity.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I know we've kind of talked about how for us how we were trying to escape that through various ways like food or men, reality TV. I know for me, thinking a lot about like my space is getting messy because I just can't even handle like where I am at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of that feeling of like feeling split in the
Mm-hmm.
spaces that we're in, and that those feelings that really just like I guess kind of made us feel a little unsteady and
Mm-hmm.
realizing like there's something we need to do to put an end to this or at least take some pathways and steps to support us in moving through that.
Yeah. And how that showed up for us in terms of exhaustion,
Yeah.
numbness, um, disassociation,
Hmm.
sublimation,
Yeah.
all the defense mechanisms that we as human beings
Yeah.
use to help us stabilize and to feel safe. Defensive mechanisms are there to help us often, right?
Hmm.
They're a response to something that's going on. They're calling our attention to something. And that even shows up in ill health, right? In many, many ways. And, we built on that in the last session to talk about the external structural things that may be happening culturally and in organizations and groups and systems. We talked about those unspoken rules, those invisible norms and expectations, those hidden forms of harm that you don't know that they exist when you're with a group or in a structure or community until you bump up into it and you're like, whoa, something's happening here that I can't quite put my finger on, and you may not have the language to really own that. We talked about power
Hmm.
and that there's, different forms of power, power over, power under. But ultimately, what we were looking for was power within. And that
Yeah.
even though we had titles and positions and have been given access and opportunities within certain groups, right? Within certain institutions, we might have positional power, but as embodied, right? Women living at multiple intersections, different cultural identity, race, gender, sexuality, right? Like that gets perceived and taken up in a different way, right? And
Hmm.
so while some people with some identities might be able to utilize and wield power in a form that serves them, that wasn't often the case with us in our roles, right? We would be the authorized, right? We'd be saying, oh yeah, you have the tower, the title and the power to do this, but then there's all these sort of covert, right, ways that we were
Yeah.
being sabotaged and undermined within that context. We talked about a little bit about bias and prejudice
Hmm.
and um, all those isms, racism, sexism,
Yeah.
as well as these sort of trade-offs, right? We were a part of generations where we got access to some things that other people in our community didn't get through by virtue of our access to education. But when when you sort of move on up, thinking about the Jeffersons, when you start to move on up in terms of like mobility, class mobility, there's these like trade-offs that you're
Hmm.
subtly asked to make. Um, and so that is really what has brought us to today's conversation,
Hmm.
which is my favorite, and it's about healing.
Yeah.
It's really about healing. And I love the phrase you use. which is called those unexpected balms, right? What are the
Yeah.
things that soothe you, right? We use
Mhm.
balms on our lips when we get chapped lips, or when our hands get cracked and dry from being in
Yeah.
water or cold weather too much. We put a salve or a healing balm on that. And
Mhm.
so that is what this conversation is about. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah. So what was your healing path? What was your balm? Like, were there particular steps that you took to help you feel repair? And was it unexpected or was it very planned? Like, this is how I'm going to get myself straight, or you just fell into it?
Um, no, it was emergent, right? It really showed up. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, as we talked about in previous conversations, is like you get to a point where the body gives up,
Hmm.
or you keep hitting a wall, or the stories you were told of what you were get and how easy it's supposed to be, when you start to realize like, wow, no matter what I do, no matter what angle I come at this, there seems to constantly be like taking 2 steps forward and like 15 steps
Yeah.
back. And so you hit a wall. In my spiritual work, we in A Course in Miracles, we call that contrast learning, and it can be very powerful when you keep experiencing a conflict or a tension, and no matter what you do, right, you can't really do it. That contrast, that the idea of you feeling fragmented or disconnected, ultimately forces you to surrender,
Mm.
to really give up. Sometimes the body breaks down before that. Sometimes the mind breaks down before that. But all that's data to really give you a clue that there's healing needed. And one thing I want to say really about healing too is like healing implies a lack, or there's a deficit of something not being there. But the definitions of healing that I want to really bring into this conversation are about like we're already whole. We
Mm.
just forget the resources that we have, the cultural resources, the spiritual resources, the community resources, the material resources. And so healing and repair is a process of remembering. I have a
Mm.
few friends who often say that, and spiritual teachers, it's just about remembering, right?
Mm.
You never changed
Yeah.
your essence, who you really are, never really changed. But it's an opportunity for you. It's like your soul is calling for remembrance.
Yeah.
So
Did you have
yeah,
a moment of remembrance that you felt like, or that you think was the time?
I think there were fear. Right. Let's start with the first one,
Mm.
where it was like a moment, but then it ended up being like multiple things that then flooded in at once. Um, I think I mentioned before when I was working as a senior executive at my organization, we called in a consulting firm to support us with strategy, and I was managing that team. And my mentor, Lori Davis West, shout out to her and Big Sister, she was one of the first ones I met who came in to do interviews in the organization
Yeah.
where I was. And the space she held for me, the questions she asked of me, the way that she saw me, um, allow for me to just pause and recognize like, oh, wow, I'm really in pain here. I've just been acting as if and moving forward, and not allowing myself to realize that was using some of these strategies that we talked about in previous
Yeah.
sessions to as balms, as substitutes for
Mhm.
healing. But they were really just short-term fixes. And so it was her love, her care, her questioning, her listening, her deep listening. That was the first moment that I was able to
Mm.
hear myself speak. Um, and
How are
event
you able, I guess, like this is a moment where it's a person coming into the workplace to be a mentor, but then she still became a mentor to you outside. Like, can you share how you, I guess, move from that? Because I always feel like I struggle with that of like finding the people who like you see people you would love to be like your mentor, but it's like how do you take that out of those spaces and like go from there?
Well, the first thing for me, I don't choose. mentorship I don't start from an intellectual, like I need a mentor.
Yeah.
Who would be a good person? Let me scan the environment. I think a lot of leadership, management, organizations, right? Like intellectual spaces make it a exercise, an
Yeah.
intellectual exercise. But for me, in order for mentorship to work, for me,
Yeah.
it's having an authentic connection in a relationship with that person.
Hmm.
And that is not from my head, that's from my heart. That's an
Mm.
energetic alignment.
Yeah.
So I saw her, and yes, she had skills and experience. She was older than me. And I saw something like, oh, I would like to do that one day, of course. But it was also, it's like, wow, she really sees me. She
Hmm.
reflects me back to me. She listens to me. Right. And so that's where it started. And so it ended up after that being like a lunch outside of work or a dinner outside of work where I could
Yeah.
really show up in a, in a space very, very authentically. And
Yeah.
so it started with Lori. But then her encouraging me, her championing me, because that's what good mentors do. They champion
Yeah.
you. They see, we call it your golden shadow. Because we talk about the shadow in psychology as that
Yeah.
part of yourself you can't see, the dark part that you're ashamed of, you don't want anybody to see, and we all have it. But what she saw was this sort of this golden part of me that I was suppressing or denying, and reflecting that back to me and championing me. And so when she started to champion me, I started to feel more energized to go out and seek new community outside of the organization. So that's when I became a part of um, the responsive org community. The responsive org community is a global community of leaders, managers, scholars, practitioners, people who believe deeply that a fundamental consciousness shift is required in organizations, teams, groups, and systems, moving from sort of an extractive, hierarchical, top down, colonizing approach, right, to
Hmm.
organizations and groups to a more open, inclusive, equal, collaborative way, agile way. So I started to get involved with the responsive community outside of work, different workshops, retreats, learning opportunities, building community there. And then I started to put my toe into like more psychological work, more deeply. That's when I decided to go back to school for my social work psych degree. I got inspired by that work. I had a change leadership fellowship that I was a part of, and this national network of people who worked in foundations. So I was able, in those containers to have healing conversation, truth telling, right? Because this is
Yeah.
about until you tell the truth about what's actually happening to you and you feel comfortable enough to tell the truth with certain people and groups, you're not going to be able to find the balm or the salve.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, I've been coaching for years, but I decided to get my professional certification, right, as a coach. When I went back to school for social work psych, and in those spaces, I started to build intimate, safe spaces to learn different skills and tools around self-healing, self-coaching, so that I can support other people with that work. It was there where I learned that I really wanted to go to therapy, right? I'd never had formal therapy in my life because, growing up Black and poor, you know what I'm saying? Going to people and talking about your business is not
Yeah.
really what we do. And most of us just didn't really have access to that. And so a lot of healing happens in community and in homes, in really informal ways, and often through our work to support one another and in spirituality. So, I ultimately ended up, so to my surprise and shock, in one of those coaching conversations around soul and spirit, realizing that I ended up going into a interfaith, interspiritual seminary. I went to seminary school.
Were you
Shout out.
always like religious before that, or this was like a
No,
new thing? Everyone was shocked when they saw you pop up.
yeah, it's so interesting that you should say that. Everyone was shocked. So, did I grow up in a religious home? No, I
Mm.
grew up in a home where, as a Black people, we were Christian,
Yeah.
we were Baptist. I had an aunt who was deep in the church. And when I was a teenager, I started to go to church with her. My father was a deeply I would say spiritual man, meaning attuned to things beyond what your, science would show you as the visible, right? Empiricist, like what you can see. He had the energy of the Buddha. I always say my father really lived with Buddha consciousness, Christ consciousness. He was just very loving. He was a hairstylist. He believed in beauty and harmony and just love. And love wasn't a concept for him. It was a practice about how he related to other people. So my father was deeply spiritual and loving, and I was able to feel that and witness that, even within the context of what was going on in my home. With my stepmother and other people, right? And even, bullying in school and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I ended up in seminary to my surprise and really thinking about a more expansive forms around ministry. Ministry isn't just about having a congregation and being at the pulpit in the traditional sense, but studying all the faith traditions really helped me to see that ministry is a practice. It's about being the presence of love in the world and being the channel for embodying that. And there's where I met one of my spiritual teachers. I became more familiar. I'd known about Ian Levinsant, but I started to study her work also more deeply and learned about the 5 A's of healing and change, which was a framework around, the idea that healing begins with radical honesty and responsibility for your own worldview, your stories, the stories you tell yourself about pain and suffering, and then really being introduced to that change process around awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, action, and appreciation. So yeah, that's basically for me, how that started to come up for me. And then I'll say one last thing about the unexpected balms, the healing was in college, I had a friend who was, let's just say, spiritual before I knew I was spiritual, and was deeply involved with consciousness work and spiritual law. And she introduced me to Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, which blew my mind, like completely transformed, right? Because there's man-made law, the law of policy and justice, and then there's universal spiritual laws that live through most of the world's faith and religious traditions. And studying those spiritual laws and being connected to spiritual law helped me to see, like, oh, wait, there are truths, deeper truths, ancient wisdom, modern thought forms and communities that are not just living the way that the world is telling you to live so that you can be successful and sit on a pile of money and have a fancy title and get a fancy house and a car, but that if you live your life in right relationship with yourself, with others, with source, with nature, with the planet, and become a channel and a steward, right? And an embodiment of healing and love, that everything changes for you in your life. So that's where I learned about Buddhism and Taoism, and of course in miracles, right? These lessons that taught me about forgiveness. And that forgiveness isn't about pretending that harm didn't happen. It's about releasing your attachment. That's what Buddhism taught, our attachment to suffering, to pain, to the story, to the belief that pain, punishment, attack, vengeance, resentment, or separation are ultimately who we are, that we can have agency and choice, right? So there are lessons in the Course in Miracles, like, forgiveness is the key to happiness, right? That holding on to resentment and old stories about ourselves and our harms keeps us psychologically and spiritually trapped, and that we can make a new choice and do a new thing. Or another Course in Miracles lessons, lesson 34, I could see peace instead of this. In other words, I could choose to look for love, to look for peace, rather than stay in the upset, right? Or the realizations of these harm narratives, whether the pain and suffering comes from within us and our consciousness or from the systems and the structures. Ultimately, those were the balms for me, the multiple pathways. And as you can see, it wasn't just one thing.
Yeah, it's
right?
multiple.
It was multiple. It started from my own recognition. Some of it was relational repair, being in relationships that helped me to see me that helped me to realize, like, oh, I could choose to return to my wholeness. It was about spiritual reframing, right? Choosing that. It was about embodiment practices, journaling, reading, prayer, um, silence, um,
Mm.
um, uh, all of those things that I now do the way that I live today, that have helped me to realize, like, there's a way to be in the world and I get to choose that no matter what my physical senses are showing me or what structures and systems are in place that are perceived barriers or obstacles to healing and transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the that it's not just one thing and that it's often like many things and not always in the same order. Like it might be you have 3 months of doing something and then you stop and then you find something else and it takes you on this like winding path because that's what it is, like a path that is not just always straight.
How did that look for you though, Lisa Marie? Like, what were the balms or the salves that really have supported you and even get into this conversation today?
I definitely resonate with what you were talking about forgiveness because I think that was a huge part of forgiving the people who have caused me harm, forgiving myself for like feeling guilty or putting myself in these situations. I was always like a lot of shame around that. And then
Mm.
for some people, removing them from my
Yeah,
space,
right.
from interacting with me. And even though that was tough, it took some time for some people, but eventually, like, no, don't hit me up, don't call me, don't talk to me. And I think realizing the poison that was like in my space and like having to get that out. So I definitely think forgiveness is a big part. And even telling those people, like, I
Mm.
forgive you, but we can't be in communication. And I release you basically.
I
Uh,
release you and I welcome you back. Should
yeah.
you have a shift in consciousness or transformation, I welcome you back for that healing. But in the meantime, in between time, I pray for you. I send you blessings. I release you.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
But yeah, I definitely think acceptance is important. I think that came from just like accepting the situation I'm in, how I'm feeling, not trying to like brush it away or avoid it. And it's like step into it. And a big part of I guess my practice was meditation. I also
Mm.
I've been reading Deepak for a while, but it was his books. I didn't know he was doing meditation until a friend told me that him and Oprah had a course. It was like a series that was focused on time, and I think that was my biggest area that I needed to like work on was feeling anxious around time. And I always like to be on time and being stressed and anxious, all these things. And so that meditation would like talk about time and focus for like a little bit, and then they'll take you through a guided meditation. So that
Mm.
really allowed me to be like present. And reading Thich Nhat Hanh, he has a book called You Are Here, Peace in Every Step. So reading all those things really got me into like mindfulness, journaling. Like I've always journaled, but I got more serious like around that time, like every day, twice a day. I was out there like this go like running through notebooks. But it was really like something that I feel like supported me in that way.
What else? I mean, I feel like when I see you, your art, like your creative, you are a creative channel for so much, right? Yes, books. You love books. But what, tell me about your art, like how that serves as a channel for healing for you.
um, I definitely think like art was something that I felt like I needed to do, especially in community. I
Mhm.
gathered like several of
Mhm.
people who were in PhD programs, even master's programs,
Mhm.
and was
Mhm.
like, hey, let's meet at my house. And so they started coming to my house, and we would once a month like have food, have art, and just like craft nights. And that was the reason why I did that, because I was just thinking like, why do I feel in this program so disconnected? And I realized, like, compared to how I was when I was at home in New York, and I had a lot of community, like a lot of spaces where we were like interacting with one another. So that was like something like big for me to do was just like I took a mosaic class. I joined a maker space. The maker space was like amazing because it was 24 hours. I had a little key. So I
Mm,
go in, I made a date like every Friday at like 7 p.m. I'm going to this maker space. And that was my Friday night, like for
mm,
just being in the maker space, making,
mm.
doing my mosaics, learning how to use laser cutters and doing all
Wow.
various like techniques. I think like working with my hands and working in a different way with my mind has always been helpful. And that was also like the beginning of the journal that I ended up intellectual will. Like I was like living through all this and like doing it, and then a friend just like jumping in and being like, oh, how are you doing this? And I shared with him, and then eventually he's like, you need to share this with other people. And that also took me on its own journey too. It's like it's almost like I use my writing to like help me heal, and then sharing that with other people.
Yeah, so we're going to talk more about your journal, Intellectual Will, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful journal that you created. Visually, the quotes, the prompts, it's really, really beautiful. And also music, right? Like music has been a really deep and profound part of your both of ours, right? I was a
Yeah.
singer, I was a performer. I've
Mm-hmm.
been singing and performing a cappella groups. I was like played flute and piccolo. I was in marching band at junior high school. I did musical theater and performing arts in college. And so returning to these things, music and the healing power of
Mm-hmm.
sound has been a deep, deep part of that. And you have a whole
Yeah.
like YouTube channel.
Yeah, I yeah, I love curating playlists. I made a playlist that like because I was so stressed during the PhD program, I was like, music was like my way of getting out. Like even storytelling, like all my playlists are meant to be listened in order. Like they're telling a story, whether it's through the lyrics, through the rhythms, like it's a story taking you through. And I made a playlist called Power. And I listen to that every single day. Like literally, it's like a 2.5 hour playlist. And that was something I listened to every day, like for years, just
Yeah.
to push me through, like, you got this, you got this. And then I started making other playlists. And recently I kind of merged them, doing like
Mhm.
collages. And then the collages are in the background with the playlist. Like a lot of the writing I have, like with the journal, there's QR codes that take you to a playlist that's meant to be like as you're writing or doing prompts, like you have the music in the background. I love concerts. I love going to concerts and
Oh yeah, oh
so
my gosh. I
that's
love
just like
singing. I love concerts.
yeah.
It's funny. We're gonna put all this so just so people know, we're gonna make sure this is all in the description box below. So that you can start to access the music and all the beautiful art and the things that we love. I do want to say something though, like both of us talked about Deepak Chopra as
Mhm.
a foundational figure early in our life, and we now know, right? His name was in the Epstein files, and there's been all this other stuff, right? There, and we know across history, right? There have been gurus, spiritual teachers that when we really go deeper and find out about what they really are about, that there's more. So I just wanted to name that here, that there's an awareness of that. And yet it's really important for us to still be able to claim that
Mhm.
this is a person, their writings, right, that has had an impact on us. And that I ultimately believe that we are spirit
Mhm.
and then there's our humanness, our ego, right? And that we're constantly at war with that. So despite what Deepak may have is doing, right,
Mhm.
what we may be discovering about his humanness and the way
Yeah.
that hasn't served us, it doesn't mean he can't be a channel for
Mhm.
a higher truth. And that he has been used in that way. And so may that brother, be accountable, speaking about repair, be
Yeah.
accountable for, right, the role he has played. And may we also realize that may there be opportunities for healing, for him, for us, for our society around the harms against women and young girls. So I just wanted to name them. So as we finish, what does it feel like now for you to be in relationship again with yourself, Lisa Marie?
Um, I like there was something that I was doing for a while when I wasn't feeling okay. Actually, when we think about art, I would watercolor in my sketchbook how I was feeling. Like you choose different colors. And for a long time, it was like gray, black.
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
over time, it had like sparks of like yellow popping out. And so once I became had like full yellowness, I realized that I was like returning to myself, like being able to imagine again, like daydream and think far into the future.
Mm.
Those were, I think, some moments, especially like just being, I always say like being outside, like just going out.
Mhm.
Like, I love sports, but for the longest time I wasn't watching sports, but now I'm out like going to games again,
Yeah.
collaborating with people like you, where I'm just like engaging with people. So I think that really was like how I felt. And I think it's like joy, playfulness, yeah, calmness, groundedness, those are
Yeah.
feelings that pop up.
Yeah, it's a reclamation, right? I
Yeah.
would say for me, what it looks like is absolutely nature and this sisterhood, these kinds of creative acts where we come together to speak our truth and to
Mhm.
talk about other possibilities. But I would also say for me, it was a return to divine truth and spiritual law. And
Mhm.
that it's an emergent practice, it's a daily practice of daily becoming, of recommitting to my faith, to trust, to devotion, to spiritual practice, to
Mhm.
um, my spiritual teacher, Mama Ia, currently has a book out called Spiritual Hygiene, attending to my daily spiritual hygiene. Just like I brush my teeth every day, I wash my clothes, I clean my house, I wash my dishes. I need to bring that same level of intentional hygiene practice, right, into my life, this room, right, where I record. This is a sacred sanctuary. I call it my work sanctuary, where
Yeah.
there's candles and crystals, and my ancestors are here. The use of Palo Santo and sage and ritual and ceremony. I start here to
Mhm.
every day to get right within so that I can then go out. I can't go out like, oh, I'm trying to change the world and tell other people how they're wrong and fix these systems and be of service if I
Mhm.
have not done what I need to do. So I would love it if you ended with that Toni Morrison quote.
Oh, yes. So I saw this in a video that she had, and I was like transcribing it down. I don't know where it's from, but it's not from a book, it's from an interview. And she said, sometimes you don't survive whole, you just survive in part. But the grandeur of life is that attempt. It's not about that solution. It is about being as fearless as one can and behaving as beautifully as one can under completely impossible circumstances. It's that makes it elegant.
Mm. It's not about being as fearless as one can and
Mm-hmm.
behaving as beautifully as one can under completely impossible circumstances,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's about choice, it's about
Mm-hmm.
agency, it's about choosing repair. And
Mm-hmm.
not giving in to the voices and the news and the social media cycles that are trying to constantly keep us in fear and contraction. Anger can be a useful emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It can be the spark, the catalyst, right? It was for this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But the invitation is that you don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay there. And so, with that, we're going to close this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if it resonates with you, if you want to please share it, please listen to it, comment. We want to respond. We want to be in communication with you. We're building something here where we want to create a space for women who are ready to connect to themselves and others so that we can move as a collective and changing and transforming and healing and repairing the systems, right, that we move in. And so we'll be back in our next dialogue to go deeper on that. And of course, we'll be sharing all the things that we mentioned today.
Mm-hmm. All right. See
I'm
you soon.
complete.
All right.
Peace.
Bye.